Mike McCarthy has said that, for Dak to play, he wants to see him in an entire full week of practice. And so today, Wednesday, we'll see the first injury report of the week. And if Dak is not a participant or a limited participant, that will obviously change the calculus.
It's the Football Playbook making his debut here. Nice and early out there down in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. RJ, welcome into the show. Buckle up. Appreciate the time here today.
It's great to be with you. Health, wealth, and happiness to everyone, in this area. But nothing but sports misery, certainly, is the way I feel these days.
Yeah, well, hey, the Astros are giving you some faith and hope down there in Texas. So the Phillies, too, in Philadelphia. It's a good time to be a sports fan, no matter what city you're living in. And big primetime matchup in Philadelphia. A lot of people excited for this one. We wanted to pop you on because you do such a great job at blogging the boys. One of the best websites out there when it comes to Cowboys coverage. We wanted to get that Dallas perspective here. And your Philadelphia Eagles, they are the only undefeated team, RJ, in the National Football League. So what have you seen from a distance, or what you've observed thus far through the first few weeks of the season? What's going to be the strategy in terms of trying to knock the Eagles off this week?
The Cowboys are playing, in a way that, frankly, isn't sustainable. It is a little bit shocking that they've been able to kind of pull a lot of things off that they have as of late. And I think there's a lot of credit to go around for that. And people are quick to assign it to people like Dan Quinn, and obviously superstars like Micah Parsons, the NFC Defensive Player of the Week. DeMarcus Lawrence, Dorrance Armstrong has come on. Obviously, Trayvon Diggs is amazing. I mean, there's a lot of talent on the defensive side of the ball. I do think that Mike McCarthy is somebody who has really steadied the ship. The Cowboys are now 9-7 in games without Dak Prescott in the Mike McCarthy era. That includes some time, obviously, beyond this season. But that is something that is very different from his predecessor. Jason Garrett, not counting the year that he was interim head coach of the Cowboys, did not have Tony Romo or Dak Prescott for 14 games. He won one of them. And so a lot of Cowboys fans are really not accustomed to this. McCarthy's that guy. Pittsburgh guy, obviously, so kind of Pennsylvania blue collar attitude, who you're in an alley, you're in a scrap. He's the dude who's going to roll up his sleeves and kind of get to work. And I know that a lot of people are low on him nationally. I'm not here to say he's the best coach in the world or anything like that, but I do think he's the difference. I think the culture he has helped kind of change has been the difference. This is a team that really, when the going has gotten tough in the past, has just kind of waved the white flag. You can argue that they benefited from a down schedule. I think that the Eagles have. I don't know that anybody in the NFL has. And I'm not a shot at the Eagles specifically, but there's just the quality is down in the NFL right now. Nobody has 4 or 5 wins against Super Bowl contending teams right now. And if the Cowboys are successful on Sunday night, they'll have one of those, obviously. But it's a multitude of factors. It's a variety of things. I mean, they just beat the reigning Super Bowl champions, and they scored one offensive touchdown, and it was a 57-yard run. And so those things can't be replicated, but they're finding a way to mitigate all of the regression to the mean that has been coming for them, at least from different perspectives, like turnovers and takeaways and things like that.
No, a lot of great points there. We're talking to RJ Ochoa, blogging the boys, and I want to follow up on the Mike McCarthy point, because you're right. It seems like Cooper Rush gets a lot of credit. Dan Quinn gets kudos and praise. But let's keep it real. Like Mike McCarthy, he didn't have to keep Dan Quinn around, because I think Quinn was also interviewed for that job. And Mike McCarthy said, no, be a part of the staff. He didn't have to do that. And to surround himself with great coaches, to have the self-awareness and confidence to do that, I feel like that's the word I want to use and ask your opinion, because you're there on a day in and day out basis. You're right. Nationally or Philadelphia, I see it from a distance, RJ, but like last week when they asked him about the Rams point spread, and he goes, oh, what is it this week? And he goes, oh, they said, oh, you're the underdog. He goes, we're nobody's underdog. I felt like that was the first time I saw nationally Mike McCarthy really own the moment, own the job, come to his own and say, hey, if I'm going to lose, I'm going to do it my way. All this Sean Payton talk in the offseason, I don't know if that had any impact. But it seems like Mike McCarthy is finally taking full ownership this season. it seems a little bit different than years past. But again, I'm watching from a distance. RJ, what have you seen up close?
I think that's really well said. There was a lot of rallying around that particular point. They were 5.5 point underdogs. They're currently, at the time you and I are talking, 6 point underdogs. This Sunday that line has grown, and so yeah, you're right. Like it does feel like his team, DeMarcus Lawrence, who's been amazing, referenced that line after the Cowboys beat the Rams, and he does. People again. I think people have decided that Mike McCarthy's a terrible head coach. They've decided that he benefited from Aaron Rodgers and that he did nothing in Green Bay. And so they're looking to confirm those priors. But, Mike McCarthy had the watermelon smashing 2 years ago. He had the monkey butt last year. And those things sound silly and cheesy and hokey, but they work, right? Like if you can get 53 dudes to believe in them or to rally around them, I mean, they work. And he does seem to have a read on he's again. I know a lot of people won't buy us. He's quite charming. He can be quite charming and charismatic and understand the moment in those ways. And so yeah, you mentioned Dan Quinn, Sean Payton. I mean, everybody has looked to kick this dude out, and he has done nothing but survive and thrive. And even if the Cowboys lose, I mean, obviously this is a really big game on Sunday night, but they're a playoff team, right? Like the Cowboys have gotten their first place games out of the way in the Bucks, the Bengals, and the Rams. Unlike every team in the NFC East that isn't them, they have yet to play the AFC South. They obviously still get to play the Commanders, and they still have to play the Eagles. But I mean, it's hard to look at this team and feel like they're not going to win 10, 11 games. And you got to figure, that's a wild card, maybe division winning record. Again, obviously there's a lot of time to go. But he's kind of made for this. He's, and we've seen him do this before in Green Bay. We've seen Aaron Rodgers go down to injury and him fight and claw and scratch and just kind of figure things out. And he had done that against the Cowboys a few different times, which is why it is kind of strange that Cowboys fans are so surprised by it.
Yeah, and again, it's taking on a life of its own. This defense, they haven't allowed 19 points through the first 5 games. You got to go back to 1972, the Doomsday defense, to go find a defense that have done things like that. 20 pressures last week against Matthew Stafford, 5 sacks and 20 sacks. I think leads the National Football League, or if not one of the top defenses around the league. And so the Eagles' offensive line, which is banged up, busted, battered, and bruised, is going to have their hands full. I do want to ask you about the offense before we shift gears, though, RJ. On that defensive line, this Dorrance Armstrong seems like he's having a career year. You got guys like Dante Fowler and Sam Williams who are backups. These guys could arguably start for other teams. And so when you factor in Micah Parsons, I mean, I saw there 9 different players have a sack on this defense. They've got at least like 5 bona fide pass rushers that I count.
Yeah, I mean, DeMarcus Lawrence missed a lot of time last year. And so there was always going to be regression to the mean as far as takeaways and things like that. But there was regression to the mean as far as injuries. I mean, DeMarcus and Neville Gallimore, who's one of the Cowboys' best defensive tackles, they missed a ton of time last year. So now they're healthy. They're here. They were already, out at this point a year ago. You mentioned Dorrance Armstrong. It's funny how fate works, obviously, in a billion different ways. The Cowboys wanted to sign Randy Gregory back. They had the contract ready to go. I'm sure you've talked about the specific contract language that led to the falling out. I think he's played well in Denver. It's unfortunate that he's hurt right now. But because they weren't able to lock down Randy Gregory, they had to pivot. They had to keep Dorrance Armstrong. And they've believed in him from day one. He comes from the mighty football powerhouse that is Kansas. So obviously a long track record of NFL players there. Sam Williams, a second-round player who they believed in. I mean, Dante Fowler was somebody that really felt like such an empty move to me. Dan Quinn specifically has a huge history with him, not just in Atlanta, but Dan Quinn recruited him to the University of Florida. And so that kind of felt like, you see different coaches do that. They just kind of go get their guys, a little bit of nepotism, but he has played well in the spurts that he's been there as well. It's all led by Micah Parsons, though. I mean, that's the obvious headline. He is, maybe the closest thing I've seen in my life to Michael Jordan, in the sense that like you think there's no way, it's impossible that he can do it again. He could do more. He can be even greater. And I mean, we're still so early in his NFL career, but he does. I've never seen a defensive player like him, certainly on the Cowboys, but very rarely across the entire NFL.
Yeah, we talk about positionless defense, and Micah Parsons redefines that. I would say, in terms of a pass rush presence in my lifetime, the doomsday defense a little bit before my time, RJ, I'd probably have to go back to Charles Haley,
Sure.
who dueled for the Cowboys and 49ers since the last time we've seen a Cowboys defensive player in terms of a pass rusher make that kind of impact. Dion primetime was pretty good too, and he was in the news this past week, oh, by the way, as well. But that's a story for another day. One last one on the defense, RJ Ochoa, Blogging the Boys, one of the best websites out there for Cowboys coverage. Make sure you check him out at RJ Ochoa. Trayvon Diggs, he's been an Eagles killer early on in his career. He's got an interception in every game that he's played. He's got 4 INTs, 8 pass deflections in 3 games against the Eagles. However, I see here it tells me teams are completing 63% attempts against him this year. That's up from 52% a year ago. A big to do about nothing, or something that you've noticed?
I think that's the ride that Trayvon is. I mean, that's his play style, and obviously that makes him so polarizing. He's naturally polarizing because he plays for the Cowboys, but because he is this kind of all or nothing player, that leads to some of these things being inflated that way. I mean, it's not inflated; it's all real. I mean, he gave up a 75-yard touchdown to Cooper Kupp last week. I mean, he was beat on that, and he really got beat on 2 plays, really just kind of when it was all said and done last week. But both of those wound up being pivotal. And both of those wound up being plays that the Rams effectively scored off of. Obviously, they outright scored on the Kupp touchdown. He tweeted after the game that he was directly responsible for 10 points. The Cowboys won 22-10. And so, if my dad's always said that a million attaboys can be wiped out by one oh crap. And that's just kind of like his style, right? Like, and so he has the big time interceptions. And honestly, prior to last week, I think he had really done a lot to put that narrative away. He did a great job of locking down Jamar Chase, did a great job locking down Terry McLaurin. A lot of people obviously think highly of him, and rightly so. But, going up against Cooper Kupp's a different thing. And, I don't know exactly how the Cowboys are going to utilize him against the Eagles. And they obviously have 2 talented receivers. But I think that it's very fair to trust him. But you do have to roll the dice sometimes, and you have to live and die with those consequences.
RJ, I don't know because I don't watch every single play of the Cowboys, but is Diggs the kind of guy where he'll shadow the number 1 receiver and line up opposite fields?
Not necessarily. No,
okay.
And he's not Richard Sherman either. That's just sticking to one side. It's just, it's matchup dependent. It's dependent on a multitude of factors. But no, he's not necessarily following one dude around.
Okay. Just wanted to get that out there for our listening audience. Again, getting the Cowboys perspective from RJ Ochoa. Great stuff here. Let's shift gears to the offense. Is it safe to assume that Dak Prescott's not going to play this Sunday, or is there still a fighting hope that he's trying to keep alive here, that he could suit up against the Eagles?
Well, I mentioned the line moved. I mean, at least, at SB Nation, we operate off of DraftKings as lines and odds, and Dallas opened as 5.5 point underdogs on Tuesday. That was down to 4.5. And as of Wednesday morning, it's up to 6. This is the highest it's been all week. And, that might just be where the money's going. Or it could be an indication that Dak Prescott's not going to play. Now, granted, it was pretty well known he wasn't going to play last week, and Dallas was still 5.5 point underdogs. I will say, in this respect, our conversation is ill-timed because we'll know a lot today on Wednesday. Mike McCarthy has said that, for Dak to play, he wants to see him in an entire full week of practice. And so today, Wednesday, we'll see the first injury report of the week. And if Dak is not a participant or a limited participant, that will obviously change the calculus. If he doesn't practice at all on Wednesday, I think it's safe to assume. It still is a bit of an assumption. But the only way I would couch all of this is to say, Cooper Rush has obviously been, quite the story this year. He did start the one game last year, as everybody knows, against Minnesota. That was also a Sunday night game, and Dallas kept their cards very close to the vest. Nobody knew that they were going to start Cooper Rush until that day. It was Sunday morning during the national news dumps on all the national shows that it was revealed that Cooper would be starting. So again, while I think you can start to draw some legitimate assumptions as this week unfolds, I mean, this is a head coach in Mike McCarthy that really believes in that kind of sportsmanship and gamesmanship and not announcing anything that you don't have to. Just as a different example of that, last week when the Cowboys flew out to LA, there was a photo of Dak that the Cowboys posted. He was not wearing the thumb brace that he has been wearing, obviously, this entire time. but during the game on Sunday, a day later, he was. So there could be a million things, right? Maybe he was just we've all like let a bandaged area like air out or something like that. Could be something like that, or maybe he got it put back on the plane. Maybe he put it on during the game because all the cameras are going to be on him. It's so hard and so difficult to know. It is the biggest question, obviously, surrounding this team right now.
Yeah, I know. I heard he was down there on the sidelines, handshaking media members. Hey, how's my grip feel? I will say, Jonathan Gannon in his press conference, the defensive coordinator for the Eagles, said he watched a bunch of film from last year and even week one and didn't see too many adjustments from the Cowboys offense. And I think that's a testament to Cooper Rush, his football IQ, and him and Kellen Moore are almost like an identical player. They were teammates, I believe, there down in Dallas at one point. So I feel like they can almost complete each other's sentences. Now, it doesn't take a genius to figure out. You look at the performance against the Rams a week ago. Yes, they pulled out the W. Yes, he's the first undrafted quarterback since Kurt Warner to win his first 5 starts. Unbelievable, historic start. But let's be real. He's not better than Dak Prescott. However, let me pose you this, RJ. Should Cooper Rush beat the Philadelphia Eagles this week, are you going to start like scratching your head like, hey, maybe we should let it ride for a little while? I mean, the same scenario played out when Tony Romo got hurt and Dak Prescott won this job. Is there any possibility that after this week the Cowboys beat the Eagles and you start saying, well, hey, maybe we do have a bona fide starter here in Cooper Rush?
I would say no. I appreciate that unlike a lot of Cowboys fans, you understand that Dak Prescott is a superior quarterback to Cooper Rush. It is the most annoying part of this fun time that the Cowboys are kind of in the middle of. Although as somebody whose job it is to create content around this team, I'm certainly grateful for all the low hanging fruit that I can scoop up. But look, I mean, and this is the unfortunate part about the debate is it turns into like having to prove how awful Cooper is, because I don't want to do that. Cooper is awesome and he deserves his flowers. But I mean, the Cowboys offense has been insanely limited throughout this 4-game winning streak. They've been very fortunate. He hasn't thrown any interceptions. I think that's probably the best thing that he's done. He hasn't turned the ball over, but he fumbled it twice on big time sacks, last week against the Rams. The Cowboys were just fortunate that he picked one up and that Tyler Smith, their rookie left tackle, picked the other one up. But I mean, 3 of these 4 wins, obviously the Cowboys have beaten the Bengals, the Giants, the Commanders, and now the Rams. 3 of those 4 wins featured big plays from Tony Pollard. Against the Bengals, Cooper pitched it to Tony Pollard. He took it 46 yards down to the 1-yard line. On Monday Night Football, everybody saw the block that Jason Peters sealed to spring Tony Pollard loose, a big-time touchdown. And again, Tony Pollard had a 57-yard touchdown, the only offensive touchdown that Dallas scored against the Rams. You mentioned Dorrance Armstrong. He had a block punt that gave the Cowboys the ball at the LA 20-yard line after they had already scored a defensive touchdown, and they couldn't get in the end zone. I mean, that's just kind of the experience here. And so I love Cooper. He has been perfect. He has at this particular thing, but they have significantly watered down this offense, and he is surviving to his credit. But there's no question that Dak Prescott elevates what they're able to do offensively. We've seen it. I do think it's a fair thing to say that we haven't seen Dak play at the level that we've grown accustomed to since the Cowboys beat the New England Patriots last year. The Cowboys, Cooper started that game against the Vikings, and Dak had a really awful second half of the season. The offense was not great. It was not good. So we still do have questions about Dak in that sense, but there's no question that he's a better player.
Yeah, no, I agree everything wholeheartedly with what you said. And, listen, the bottom line is this. Yeah, I don't think you've scored more than 25 points in any single game. So, as you know, you got to put points on the board. Cooper Rush, though, has earned himself an off-season contract. If it's not the Dallas Cowboys, somebody's going to pay this man to be a valuable backup in the NFL. He's proven that he can do that much. RJ Ochoa here. I want to ask you about this because I think this is a legitimate debate. And again, I'm watching from a distance, but the last 2 seasons at least, RJ, Tony Pollard looks like the more explosive, effective runner. Color me crazy, but I would be starting Pollard. Am I wrong here? I mean, it's a great 1-2 punch, but it just seems like when Pollard comes in, this guy gashes defense. And I get it. Zeke is that constant between the tackles, grinder. But this Pollard boy, he can bust off chunks of yardage in single runs.
I mean, I mentioned, the kind of their three most important offensive plays in the last month have been executed by Tony Pollard, and Tony Pollard almost primarily. No discredit to everybody working around him, but this debate is something that the Cowboys fans have been having for a long time. I wouldn't say that there's a Cowboys fan who hates Zeke by any means. I think everybody's really grateful for him, and obviously this has been quite the era since Dallas drafted him 6 years ago. But I mean, everything you said is objectively true. You can't look at the two and think that Zeke is the better runner. You can argue that he's played more because he's paid more. There's obviously that conversation to be had. It does seem like both of them will probably be elsewhere in 2023. The guaranteed money on Zeke's contract is up. Tony Pollard is just on an expiring contract at this point. But there are things that Zeke does, and so again, kind of like the Cooper Rush thing, this conversation always turns into, one is great, one is trash, and that's not the case at all. They both have strengths that can both be helpful. They can both be utilized, and I think the biggest argument from Cowboys fans and from myself included, as my dog's name is Bear, so his second team is really just an
That's right. Story of the underdogs. We love that in Philadelphia.
but I mean, there's room to use them both, and that's long been the gripe of Cowboys fans, is that it was about this time last year when Zeke Elliott suffered a PCL injury, and they kept trotting him out there, handing him the ball over and over and over again. You have to find touches for Tony Pollard. To your point, I mean, he has to touch the ball 8 to 10 times a game at minimum. He's not somebody that you have to kind of feed and work up and get him going or anything like that, but he has to be involved in the offensive game plan. We've heard for years that they're going to work him in as a slot receiver. We haven't really seen that, although maybe the change of quarterback did kind of impact that, at least early on. But he is so special. He is so talented, and so he is their most explosive player on offense by far.
Yeah, I remember him in the slot down there at Memphis coming out, and you're right. We haven't seen a lot of that in the pros. I don't see how that guy's not touching the ball at least like 15 times a game. I don't know. I just see every time I turn on ESPN, this guy's busting a big run. I know you're busy, RJ. Appreciate the time. We're going to get you out of here, I promise. But you mentioned our old friend, Jason Peters, who I know was brought on for some Aflac insurance and got the injury here this past week. But what, in a short period of time, what was he able to bring to the team? What will his role be moving forward? How serious of an injury is this? Is he going to miss extended time?
My own personal guess, and just a guess, is that he's probably out through the bye week at least. I mean, after this Philly game, Dallas has 2 more before their bye week, and they're against Detroit and Chicago. I know Detroit can be cute, but you got to like your odds against them if you're Dallas at this point, especially if Dak is back by then. He's had such an interesting role, for having played so little. Obviously Tyron Smith was, injured, and the Cowboys are hopeful he'll be back. I mean, that's still sort of a TBD situation, but everybody thought he was going to come in and play left tackle, but Dallas kicked Tyler Smith out, and that felt really, last ditch effort. Please, chunking a Hail Mary up, please save us. That felt Dak Prescott, Tony Romo like. And Tyler Smith has played like that. He's been kind of what Dak Prescott was as a rookie, come in and been amazing, been the perfect answer, and is the clear answer at left tackle for the future, obviously. So that relegates Jason Peters to left guard duties. And we saw it on display really most prominently, I would say, against the Giants, and that one Tony Pollard run is evidence of that. But he has been an incredible mentor to Tyler Smith. And I mean, whatever, amount of Aflac insurance the Cowboys gave him was an incredible investment in that sense. Tyler has learned a lot from him already. He talks about that all the time. And so if that's all this winds up being is the Cowboys brought in, somebody to teach and talk to Tyler Smith, it was absolutely 100% well worth it.
No, I mean, is essentially a player coach. And again, Tyler Smith, who coming out of Tulsa, maybe a little bit in over his head, hey, to pick the brain of a future Hall of Fame inductee, seems like it's working out pretty well. I know he had a little bit of a rough patch against the Rams last week, but up until that point was pretty stellar. And the offensive line as a whole, I think, has been overachieving, yes?
Yeah, I mean, and again, they made a lot of bets, and that's where, a lot of Cowboys fans are trying to take some victory laps here. They bet on Terrence Steele, who's a third-year undrafted free agent tackle. Their decision to move on from Lyle Collins seems to be aging rather well. Everybody saw the little dust-up between Lyle and Zach Taylor on Sunday night. The plan at left tackle always was bad. I mean, to be very clear, they banked on Tyron who had entering this year missed time in 6 straight seasons, and unfortunately was lost for what might wind up being the entire year. And they fell into this Tyler Smith situation. They worked Tyler exclusively at left guard throughout camp and the preseason. He had never seen a snap at left tackle until Tyron went out, and so he saved them in that sense. But their left guard situation is still a bit of a question mark, which is why if Jason Peters is able to come back, that really helps shore that up. But everywhere else, Tyler Biadasz is their center, who they picked up 2 years ago in a trade with the Philadelphia Eagles on draft day. And so Zach Martin's obviously amazing. It's held up, and it's held up for a non-athletic quarterback in Cooper Rush. So you got to be excited about the prospects of Dak Prescott returning, whether that happens on Sunday in Philadelphia or not.
All right, last one, RJ, on the offensive side, the wide receivers. We haven't talked about them. Obviously, CeeDee Lamb's the guy. I know Gallup was banged up early on. Noah Brown has made a little bit of a name for himself. Now, we saw the Eagles corners playing this off-man coverage a week ago. What is going to be the Cowboys' plan of attack? Will they feast off of that kind of defensive game plan?
I mean, that really does come down to whether or not Dak is involved and able to kind of challenge, this Eagles secondary, which is certainly very talented. I'd say that, if you asked any Cowboys fan, like who's been the most disappointing player this year, it's probably CeeDee Lamb. He has had moments, certainly of being the alpha, of being great. And I think nobody is checked out on his future. But he has had some questionable moments. He had a big time drop this past week against the Rams. He had that drop everybody saw on Monday Night Football. He did, have a moment of redemption, thankfully, afterwards. But that's a bet that isn't really working out. You could say, I mean, the Cowboys are 4-1, but they did bank on CD taking that next step, and that hasn't happened in total seriousness quite yet. Michael Gallup back, though, has been a revelation. Coming off the ACL, he's still kind of working his way back into normal playing time, but it isn't limited, but the less than normal playing time we're seeing from him has been incredible. You're right. Noah Brown has been awesome. The Cowboys kind of missed for now on their 3rd-round pick, Jalen Tolbert. People thought he was going to come in and be a help from day one. That just isn't materializing. He's been inactive far more than he hasn't. James Washington is somebody who the Cowboys signed. He was actually their first external free agent signing. We have yet to see him. He was injured in the early days of camp. But yeah, I mean, the Cowboys are just kind of making it work. It's CeeDee Lamb, Michael Gallup, and just some dudes. And they've been fortunate that they've had the right combination of other elements and luck, that they haven't really needed somebody like CeeDee to totally step up and win them a game. It might be something like that this week, especially if the Eagles are able to score on them. They've been really, I mean, you mentioned the points allowed. They haven't had to play a game where they've had to score 30 points to win. And Philadelphia is certainly an offense that can make that be the case. And so it really does kind of all come to that. It all always points back to the defense of the Cowboys and what they're able to do.
It's truly been a next man up mentality. Drum roll, please. It's prediction time with RJ Ochoa, Blogging the Boys. Tell our listening audience at home where to find all your great content, what you have on deck, and a final prediction, if you can, here for the Cowboys and Eagles on Sunday night.
Sure. Bloggingtheboys.com. Obviously, I'm on Twitter at RJ Ochoa, and that's kind of a hub for everything I do. I know that I'm picking Dallas to cover. Certainly if the line is 6, I mean, even if it's 4.5, I really like their odds there. I really do think this defense is going to be, what we've expected it to become, or what we've seen it be, and hope it can be. And so I really think that effort shines through. I like the spot that Dallas is catching Philly in. Wasn't, super impressed by last week's win. I mean, a win is a win is a win. And so that's ultimately what matters the most. But it does, this feels like the least, stout version of the Eagles that we've seen so far this year. So I could see this being just the Eagles kind of falling into the formula that Dallas needs to win, assuming Dak Prescott does not play. I mean, I didn't come this far to pick the Cowboys to lose this game of all games. And so I'm admittedly a little bit homered out here. I'll take the Cowboys to win, but I do think it's something like 22-19, 20-17, 21-16. I mean, maybe you get a weird wonky safety, mixed extra point, something that kind of clouds and funnies up the score. But this is, I think this goes a long way in the narrative of the season. We were talking about it at our site and among our staff. If Cooper Rush, beats the Cowboys, again, I don't think there's any conversation, but I do think that damages Jalen Hurts' MVP campaign, because I think people will say, like, you lost to Cooper Rush, as fair or unfair as it would be. If you lose this game, it's so difficult, and it's still so early in the season, but it's so difficult to kind of come back from that, from losing to the backup quarterback while on prime time, the whole world watching. So this is a big butterfly effect game for the rest of the season, and the way a lot of things are going to be figured out.
It's the marquee matchup of the Eagles and Cowboys season thus far. You could argue it's the marquee matchup of the NFL season thus far. You mentioned the Cowboys beat the Bengals and the Rams already this year, two teams that were in the Super Bowl. Philadelphia, the lone unbeaten team this year. It's going to be quite the showdown, RJ, and really appreciate the time and the great insight and everything you do at Blogging the Boys. And hopefully maybe down the road when we revisit the second matchup, we can pop you on again. It was definitely a pleasure.
That works. I love that. Anytime, let me know. And again, health, wealth, happiness. Hope you guys win the lotto. I hope your dinner is amazing. Hope you find $100 bills on every corner. But I hope that your sports life is pain.
Hey, same back to you, RJ. Thank you for the time.